Hey everyone, we are teaching Tilt Brush, and this episode is all about animated brushes. So it overlaps a little bit with some of the other simple brush tools, but we're going to look more specifically at the types of animations and how to use them in the art that you create rather than just a brushes overview. So we're going to look at the main types of animated brushes, and we're going to break them into three main groups. So teaching Tilt Brush are animated brushes, and we're going to start on just go right down the pages. Now, page 1 is all standard marker tools, so there are no animated tools in here. But page 2 brings in our first simple animated tools. So we're going to first look at some of the three types. The three types we have. Type 1 is going to be environmental animations. So these are paint tools that we paint, and then they just sort of animate in the place we paint them. So things like the smoke tool, when we paint it down, the smoke's going to animate. So if I bring that close to the camera, you can see it does this sort of slow wobble where it is. It doesn't move around. There's no specific direction. It just does a slow wobble. Even if I select it and rotate it to a different direction, it's still just doing the same slow wobble. So in environmental tools, and we'll look at a bunch of other environmental brushes for animations. Another type of animated brush we have is a simple animated line. This is a line that you paint, and that line does its own little thing. So one that a lot of people will think of would be the electricity tool. Where's my electricity tool? When I paint it as a line, that line just does its little warble thing. Now, many of these line tools are also audio brushes. So if there was sound playing, they would follow the sound in different ways. This is not the audio brushes class. We'll actually do a cut link to the audio brushes class. But this one is about the line animated tools. And there's a couple other ones like this as well. So we'll look at them as a group. Environmental, line. Now with line, if I do select a line and move it around, change its size, if there's any motion to it, that motion does change to stick with the way you point it. So as I rotate this in different directions, the movement within the line stays consistent. So if it was an up and down motion when I draw it horizontal, if I rotate it, it does become a side-to-side type of motion. But we'll look at some other examples of those animated line animated tools. The third type of animated tool we're going to look at is directional animated tools. So these are actually dependent on the way I paint them. Things like the neon pulse. If I actually paint it in a direction, top to bottom, the animation takes place top to bottom. If I paint it bottom to top, the animation takes place bottom to top. So these animations have a specific direction based on the way you paint them. And if I use my selection tool to grab these guys and rotate them, then their animation does indeed rotate to match the new direction it would have been painted. So we're going to look at, first I can get rid of one of these, and then we're going to move this one over here. So we're going to look at our three main types of animated tools and the relationships and how to use them. Environmental, line, directional, animated tools. Let us know in the comments if you have questions or any suggestions on more details you'd like to see. But we're going to now focus in on these environmental animations. I'm going to rotate that smoke around so we can see it from this direction. Make it a little bigger. So we can see with our smoke here, wherever you paint it, it's got this slow warble to it. Nice little nebula. There is an animation. If I take that same smoke tool, smoke, and I'm going to use a little dimmer color here, and I give it a direction, a stroke, you can see how that whole line has that warble to it. No matter how I move it and resize it, it will always do that same warble, completely independent to anything else I do. So I don't have any direct control over these animations, but I can at least see how they go. You notice how it stays in place, so I can use it for cresting waves, clouds in the sky, smoke coming from a train, that type of thing. animated environmental. So we've got the smoke tool is one of the most popular, but really the fire tool counts as this as well, because it's going to do a simple animation that stays in one place. If I do a long spiral, you can see how it's the same animation, the same stroke over and over. You can even see it's how it's repeated. Ideally, if I do it at different directions, different lengths, different sizes, make them overlap, that helps disguise the fact that it's the same repeated fire over and over. But that's why it counts as an environmental, is because I can't actually control the fire. I can make what it looks like, I can place it, do its size and things, but I can't change the overall animation. It is a simple environmental tool. Fire animation. I put embers in this category as well, because when I paint these embers, I'm going to do nice bright yellow embers here. You can see it follows the line I paint, but they always go up. So if I paint up to down, it's a stream going up. If I paint down to up, it's the exact same stream. If I grab this with a selection tool, you can see it's just the starting point. If I then rotate this starting point and turn it off, they still go up. So if I grab this, turn it completely upside down, the embers still go up. So I count this as environmental, not directional, because we don't have any control over how an ember is going to look. So I'm going to shrink, let's grab you, shrink you down, put you over here. Ember as another environmental type of animation. It's also fairly large. You can see, even though I painted it at human scale, the whole stack of embers is actually about 10, 12 feet tall. So at normal scale, that one stroke, here they are over here, if I paint that one stroke, they're about that tall. So if I'm on a giant size scale and I paint that stroke, now when I go back to human scale, those are actually coming up to about my waist. Here they are over here. So when it sparks, embers, as an environmental animation. Color has a profound effect. Brightness doesn't seem to have as much of an effect. Brush size affects the individual dots, not the size of your stream. So if I go for a very large brush size, you can actually see their little squares. Whereas if I go for a very small brush size, they're much smaller, finer points. Environmental animation using ember. Ember. Snow is environment as well, because as embers go up, snow, we'll do a classic white snow, snow always goes down. Gentle. Size of your brush is the size of the snowflakes. So a larger brush, you can see the snowflakes themselves are larger. It also creates a larger field. So if I have a small brush, the cone of snow is a much narrower cone. Whereas a larger brush, one stroke fills a much larger area with the larger brushes, larger snowflakes. So if I go up to a huge scale and do the big snowflakes, then when I go back to human scale, these are like big 6-inch snowflakes falling around me. But we can't control the direction. So again, if I just paint small snowflakes in a specific horizontal line, when I use the selection tool, come on, snowflakes, there we go. You can see it's just starting point. So even if I rotate this, grab this, tricky, there we go, and rotate it vertically, when I let go, the snow still falls from top to bottom. So like embers, I can't actually control anything other than the size of the snow, size of the snowflake. The animation itself is not under my control. These types of things may or may not respond to audio. Most of them don't, but some of them might, like the fire can flicker in tempo to the music. We cover audio in a different lesson. So I'm going to go back to, let's see, get rid of that snow, go back to normal human scale and get to my environmental, and I'm going to add snow along the bottom here, underneath the embers. Embers go up, Snow goes down. Environmental. Stars are also environmental because they just stay where you paint them. That's it. Size of the brush is the size of the star. So now you can see some more of the shape in these guys. If I go very, very tiny, then they become just little sparkling points. Stars stay where you put them. And again, it doesn't matter if you rotate them. There's no direction to them. They're purely environmental. I paint them here, and they stay right there. So I can make a nebula in space with sparkling stars. Or they could be used to show like an enchanted sword. Has these sparkles. They'll always stay right around the blade. They won't go drifting up and away like embers do. Stars as an environmental. The color just changes the color, the tint, and the brightness will allow you to see more color. So right now I've got a very bright yellow, but if I go to a very dark yellow, you can get more of the pure color. Brighter color puts more white in the stars, darker color, but we can't control the animation. We can control the placement, we can control their appearance, but the animation is environmental. Stars. The other environmental one is bubbles, because they're also, if I get a nice blue bubbles and I paint them, they're just going to stay right there. They do a warbly effect similar to smoke, in that they'll just sit there and give a suggestion of movement. They never actually go anywhere. It's just their environment they're in shifts, very similar to the smoke. In fact, if you paint them together, you'll notice their environment is actually fairly synchronized. They'll both have a warble that warbles at about the same time. So while the bubbles move, the smoke is moving at a similar speed. This allows you to really start combining effects in a larger art form because a lot of these animations are predictable. Because they're just an endless loop, we can use them to build up more interesting effects. These are the simple environmental animated tools. Environmental in that we paint them where we want them, but we can't control the actual animation, anything about it. Some of these respond to audio, but not all of them do. These are the environmental animated tools. Class 1, environmental. The second type of animated tools are these line tools. They happen where we paint them, similar to the animated tools, but instead of being a region, they are a specific line, and the size of your brush controls the size of the line. So electricity is one example where it's got this vibrating line. Many of these are audio, and in the audio lesson, we really look at how to use these with music and background, but for now, we're just going to use them as straight animations. So the electricity and the rainbow both have the same repeated animation. Wherever you paint them, the direction you paint them, you can see how no matter which way I go, it's got the same repeated pattern. If I grab these with a selection tool and move them around, the animation is affected. So the pattern that the rainbow animates in, the waveform, does correspond to the way it's painted, to the way the brush is oriented in your sketch. So both the rainbow and electricity are the same type of thing. Waveform as well. This one is definitely geared more towards your audio uses, but you can see just the way you paint it, it does leave these patterns. From here, we don't directly control the pattern, but it does stay exactly where the line is painted. So we can actually paint messages and things, and it's going to be no problem as far as finding out where the lines are supposed to be and stay where they are. So if I move them or recolor them, it's still predictable. It's still a simple line in any way I draw them. Waveform, rainbow, electricity, those are all standard animated in a line. We're going to look at the other ones in the direction, but most of these are pretty much. Now, chromatic wave, you can see it's got a spiral of color. Since I've got a strong blue, it is dominant blue. If I go to a strong red, it's dominant red. If I just go gray, no base color, then you can sort of see how it mixes all the colors together. With a brush, it's wherever I paint it. There is a slight direction, so now we're going to start moving in towards those directional tools, but you can see how I have no direct control. If I paint it that way and I paint it this way, there's a subtle difference. Really, this one is much more for audio. Direction matters much less when the whole thing is pulsing to music or vibrating to a voice in an audio type of thing. So let's narrow some of these down. So we've got those, our waveform. Here's our chromatic wave. Get to our brushes, chromatic wave. That's it for our just simple lines, because most of the others are now going to get even more directional than this. These, you can see, it's just a pulsing thing, but our directional ones really have a facing. The way you paint it, it's going to follow that as a motion. So our neon pulse, you can see how our chromatic wave does that a little bit as well. Disco is another one that follows the direction. Disco, however, is different from the others. I'm going to paint this from bottom to top. The animation pulse goes the opposite direction. Most of them follow your pattern. This neon pulse actually followed, so if I go bottom to top, the light goes bottom to top. With a disco, I painted bottom to top in disco, but you can see how the pulsing ripple feels a little different. Both of these are affected by our selection tool in that if I change their size, change their direction, their animation does take on that new angle, that new direction. These directional ones, comet is also directional. Wherever you click is the comet head, and when you drag, that's the direction those flames shoot. So if I'm using this in different colors and different styles, and I want those flames to be going in the same direction, I'm doing a fire animation, then I need to make sure my brush stroke is that same directional. Because if I do it the other direction, it's an obvious difference in that stroke. All of these flames are going the same way. It's a directional tool. So a lot of these animated tools, you need to pay attention which direction you want it to go. These can be used to really reinforce a lot of our animations, a lot of our settings for water and things like that. So I'm going to reel back and we're going to look at the streamers. Streamers is another one of the direction you paint it is the direction of flow. And the size of the brush is the size of the pieces. Now, these can be tricky if I want to do it in more than one stroke. Because getting the timing, if there's a little bit of overlap, it's not as noticeable that they're two different pieces. But if you're not good with your aim, any gaps in it or too much of an overlap, leave these obvious points where things are fading in and fading out. So I can do several continuous pieces. It takes a lot of practice to get those edges to be a little less obvious. But streamers can be a lot of fun just because of the size and direction. If you're doing things like cityscapes, these to imply highways. We'll have white going in one direction, and then we have red going in the other direction to imply taillights and headlights, that type of thing. Direction to the way you paint them, as opposed to just simple lines or just simple environments. Directional in animated tools. Light wire is your Christmas lights. So if I drag them in a direction, the pulse of the Christmas lights follow that direction. So you can see these are going in opposite directions. Most of these are repeated. So if I start from the same place, it should give me the same brushes as we go. So you can see it's lining up the pieces I've got. Part of it's going to depend on how even you keep your strokes. If I actually go from light bulb to light bulb, I'm now 3/4 of the way to the next light bulb, end on the light bulb. So I should have a long stalk, end on a light bulb. Light bulb. Light bulb. So if you're trying to get repeated actions, it can be very tricky getting things to line up the way you want. But they're always going to be consistent in the direction you paint them. So you can have repeated objects, or just keep repainting until you be aware of where you stop affects where you start for the next round. So if I stop right after the bulb, you can see it's fairly consistent in the patterns I'm setting up. The timing then works out. Pulse. Oops, way off on that one. But now we're getting into using these directional, these repeated. And again, brush size affects the size of your thing. Light wire always follows the direction, and again, some of these are going to be audio responses, so depending on, let's see if I can get this to work out right. I've got about 1/4 inch to spare, so let's do it about here. And now they're following up together pretty well. Hey, that's not too bad. Directional animated tools. Chromatic wave, we saw over here. It does look a little different whether you go up or down. We do have that implied direction, but the moment we bring in sound, it's dependent on the audio, not the direction as much anymore. We've seen disco and comet. The other ones are pretty much not animated. So we've got these environmental tools, great for setting up a spot animation. They're tricky to use with the 2D standard paintbrushes because they will stand out as moving, but they're a great way to get suggestion of movement, of presence. Whereas the direction actually lets you focus and see things moving. So if I'm using things like the disco and I use that same brush over and over in the same direction, it really does reinforce the idea of a stream of water using our streamers. Where's our streamers? Streamers. Whoops. Streamers, please. Vehicles. Whatever way we're using it, these ways really get a lot of motion animation life that we can't do in 2D art. Really, it's now going to depend on the art you're creating. Some of these can be used to imply larger scale stuff. So if I'm painting a city, vehicle traffic, blinky lights on the top of buildings, that type of stuff. These can be used with audio as far as building a structure that's reacting to the music. One of our audio sketches, we build a DJ setup that's actually pulsing and dancing to the music that you're playing at the same time. Using these lines, so I'm not giving it direction so much as just having a pulse, a beat, an animation where it is. Now with a quest, these animated tools do take a little more processing. So if you really start going crazy with some of these, you can start hitting that low memory warning. But by really being careful, maybe undoing and deleting, and you can go back with an eraser and delete some of the extra lines that don't really fit the pattern, trimming it back a little, save some memory, save some use. It's really when you start going overboard, I start using this and then duplicating it 100 times, that's where we start really pushing the smaller processors. Even a PC without a big video card, a lot of animation is making it work a little harder than just a standard painting, sketch. So the real trick is, in your sketches, where are these appropriate to use? If I'm using painting a vehicle, things like blinky lights on consoles or running lights on the exterior can give it a lot of life. Things like smoke coming down engines. Unfortunately, we don't have the motion from the smoke, but a billowing fog or a column of smoke from a fire on a still night, we get a little bit of motion in there. So it's really coming up with creative uses. Some of them are obvious, snow is snow, but using some of these in slightly more creative ways. So the stars, maybe I'm going to have a forest and I'll have fireflies in the background. So just 1 or 2 points of blinky light. So I'll paint a little bit and then trim back what's there. Trim back what's there. A little too much? Too much. But ways of using these tools, now I've only got 3 actual stars. Now, if that was in the background of a forest, fireflies, will-o-wisp, that type of thing. Or if I make myself really, really, really tiny and do this up and down the edge of a sword, all of a sudden I'm now holding a magic sword in my hand. I'll even select and grab. So as I've got this, make it even bigger, you can see how the use of these things, the animation, can be used to get a lot more than we can do with a standard 2D art. Bring things to life, make things in a direction, make things happening in a much more controlled way. So we can imply, give motion to things in art like water, like clouds, so that they feel much more alive. The whole point of doing this in a computer as opposed to 2D art is that not only can we do it in 3D space, but we can now start to bring animation into it as well. Tilt Brush has a lot of animated tools. These are available on all versions of Tilt Brush, including the Quest, and we will look at in a later class how some of these will react to audio as well. But this one really is specifically focusing on the animated tools and the different groups and how they're used. We'll be back with other Teaching Tilt Brush on just about every subject, so check out the playlist. We're here every week. I'm going to use the chromatic wave here for our standard closing message, just because I like the way it works. Let us know in the comments if there are questions you have, or if there are tools you would like us to cover, or even art details. We're going to be doing audio tools. We're going to be doing more art class subjects. We're here live every Sunday on twitch.tv/shamelessmayhem. Plus, you can check out all of our videos on youtube.com/shamelessmayhem. Have fun with your tilt brush. Let us know the types of things you do, and we'll see you on another lesson. Have fun.